Good morning and welcome to our Sunday worship service here at First Parish in Framingham. I am the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, Senior Minister at First Parish. Whether this is your first time joining virtual worship or your 1000th time, you, dear one, are welcome here. Thank you for inviting your spiritual community into your home on this Sunday morning. The First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate all people of all sexual orientations, races, genders, ages, abilities, or beliefs. So wherever you are on life's journey, whatever device you are watching this on, you are welcome here. Thank you to Marianne Orlando and Daryl Hess, who decorated the chancel for this morning's service. The chancel is decorated in celebration of LGBTQ History Month, and I added some rainbow color changing lights. We won't have those going for the entire service, but for the introduction, it made sense. Immediately following the service, there will be a Zoom coffee hour. The sign-in information will be shown on the final screen. We will now listen to and hear our opening hymn, Come My Way, My Truth, My Life. Feel free to sing along as the words come up on the screen. Our opening words come from the work of Unitarian religious educator Sophia Lyon-Fawes. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment, the wonder of being together, so close, yet so far apart. Each hidden in our own separate chamber, each listening, each trying to speak, yet none fully understanding, none fully understood. We gather in reverence before all tangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith tradition. It represents a flame of wisdom and of hope. As the children of our congregation light the chalice, and as I light the chalice in our sanctuary, may we each kindle our own separate flames. You are invited to type into the chat box, if you're watching this live, the chalice is lit in our home.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
Please join us in our words of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church.
The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
This morning, we're going to be talking a little bit about feelings in today's time for all ages. Now, when I think about spiritual practices, I think about how it changes the way I feel and how sometimes it will help me with really big feelings that I don't know what to do with. So today's story is being read with thanks to the publishing house Abrams Children's Books, and it's called In My Heart, A Book of Feelings by Joe Whittick and illustrated by Christine Rusi. Look at that heart. My heart is full of feelings, big feelings and small feelings, loud feelings and quiet feelings, quick feelings and slow feelings. My heart is like a house with all these feelings living inside. Sometimes my heart feels like a big yellow star, shiny and bright. I smile from ear to ear and twirl around so fast I feel as if I could take off into the sky. This is when my heart is happy. Other times my heart feels strong. I stand up tall as if I can touch the clouds. New people and places don't frighten me. I can do it. Watch me go. This is when my heart is brave. When I get really angry, my heart feels as if it's going to explode. Don't come near me. My heart is yelling, hot and loud. This is when my heart is mad. But other times, my heart is cool. I bob along gently like a balloon on a string. My heart feels lazy and slow, as quiet as snowfall. This is when my heart is calm. On harder days, mean words hurt my feelings, and my heart feels hurt too. It's fragile and delicate, but it can be healed with extra kisses. This is when my heart is broken. Some days my heart feels as heavy as an elephant. There's a dark cloud over my head and tears fall like rain. This is when my heart is sad. But my heart doesn't stay sad. Like springtime after winter, the sun comes out again. My heart grows tall like a plant reaching toward the sky. This is when my heart is hopeful. Can you reach up and touch the sky? Eek! When I see something scary, my heart beats fast. I feel cold as if a chilly breeze has crawled up my neck, and I run away as fast as I can. This is when my heart is afraid. When it's time for a bit of fun, my heart feels full of giggles and wiggles. Abracadabra, I hop around like a bouncy bunny. This is when my heart is silly. Sometimes I hide my heart away where no one can see, like my own small treasure. I don't want anyone to look at me. Safe on my swing, I can watch the world from up above. This is when my heart is shy. My heart can feel so many feelings, and yours can too. Today, my heart is proud. How does your heart feel?
To this tapestry of a community, we each bring our joys and our sorrows, our milestones, happy and sad occasions. We know that joy shared is joy expanded, and sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting a burden. There will be prompts on the screen that will give better order to our sharing. Do remember this, friends. In this virtual space, privacy cannot be guaranteed. So do feel free to get in touch with me if there is something a little too tender to share that you wish to let me and others know about.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak with me, speak with me, speak with me, oh my soul. Speak with me, speak with me, speak with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me.
Now is the time in our service that we set aside for prayer and meditation, a space for contemplation and to ponder the things which weigh deepest on our hearts. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us by our true first name, which is beloved. We give thanks for the chance to gather as a virtual community. We give thanks for this congregation, for all its years of existence since 1701. I give thanks for the leaders and the staff of this congregation who make it what it is. And I give thanks for the people who are watching this service. You each make it what it truly is. A community. And I give thanks that there are communities all across the world, such as ours. I give thanks for the fact that there are communities such as ours who are there to support people during the trying times in their lives, the times where they don't know if they will be able to go on. Communities that give support to people who are ill or lonely, living with mental illness or addiction. May communities such as ours reach out to those who need help, providing the support that they have provided for centuries. This month, our meeting house, and for this time of contemplation and prayer, the chancel they have purple lights shining on them. Purple is the color for domestic violence awareness. We pray, and we hope, and we will do more than that, to work to create a world where there is no intimate partner violence. We know, too, that our world is beautiful and it is also broken. Let us be a way, a conduit of the divine, perhaps, or a representative of humanity, to work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world, whether they are in cities abroad or cities in our country or in private homes. May we bring peace. And may we also remind all of those people who suffer under oppression that they have worth and dignity. May we proclaim that Black Lives Matter. May we do more than that. May we work to remind everyone of that truth. There is a lot that I could pray for today. So much chaos. So much hurt in this world. And I know that if I tried to name everything, I would still forget it. I would still forget something. So I give thanks that there is a mystery beyond all understanding. That means that everyone who is suffering hopefully has someone that cares for them. And we know, too, that we can be our own harshest critic. We know all the ways that we have come up short. We know all of the ways that we have put up barriers between our authentic selves, between our loved ones, and between us and humanity. This is your reminder that you are loved and lovable, not in spite of those imperfections, but because of them. And because we can breathe, because we are living, there is always time to rebuild that relationship, to move into right relationship with ourselves and with others and the world around us. May all that is holy hear these prayers. I say and do all things for love's sake. though we are not passing these plates, it is important to support the ongoing work of this congregation in these walls and beyond them. The work of this congregation depends on your generosity. Michael A. Schuler, the minister emeritus at the First Unitarian Society of Madison, writes these words: "If you are proud of this church, become its advocate. If you are concerned for its future, share its message. If its values resonate deep within you, give it a measure of your devotion. This church cannot survive without your faith, your confidence, and your enthusiasm. Its destiny, the larger hope, rests in your hands." Instead of using a reading about spiritual practices from some book, I asked on Facebook if anyone at First Parish had a spiritual practice that they would like to share about. And 6 of you responded. I was so glad to talk to each one of you about your spiritual practice. Thank you to Marianne, Daryl, Lily, Michael, Lee, and Julie for sharing about your practices. And thank you especially to Lily Christian for doing the editing for this segment. We will also be sharing the uncut interviews on YouTube in the next week or so you can listen to the full interview that I did with each member of the congregation there.
It was hard about learning yoga.
Yeah.
In a class situation, I found it very hard not to compare myself to others. It took me a while to learn that you go with where you are in yoga. You accept yourself as you are, and you go forward from there and say, this is what I can do today. This is how far I can get in this position, and it's okay. Anything that yoga works on could also be taken off of the mat and into my life. So if I'm working on strength in a yoga class, or in my own practice, then how can I take that strength into my life? How can I stand my own ground because I'm strong? In yoga, there are mudras, which are hand gestures that have some kind of focused intent. And there's mantras, and the mantras are very positive affirmations. So one is, I am always calm in the center of my being. You do the mudra and the mantra, and you say it a few times, and then say it out loud, and then to yourself. I am complete and whole exactly as I am. So what can be more positive than I am complete and whole exactly as I am?
So my practice is mindfulness meditation, which I started in about 2012. And I like to do a stretching routine before I meditate. And I learned my practice from audiobooks by John Kabat-Zinn and Pema Chodron.
What are some of the hiccups or trip-ups that you experienced as you were first learning this practice?
The hardest thing, I think, for most people, or what I hear from most people, is just adapting to stillness, because life is crazy busy and you're used to it. So learning how to just be still, it's a big deal. 3 minutes at first was hard, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then 40 minutes became the sweet spot. For me, mindfulness, I try to make it a lifestyle. You can do a walking meditation. I love those. I walk as frequently as I can. I should sit every day, but I don't. I've got no point in my life where I'm more apt to meditate if I can join a group with Zoom. We meditate, then we chat, we talk about either our experience or whatever. A mindfulness lifestyle is just trying to do one thing at a time, and just be there with that one thing that you're doing. So you can make a meditation out of just about anything. With mindfulness, you're not thinking about what's next. You're not thinking about what happened before. You are in the present moment with what you're doing. There isn't anything more centering that I can think about than just focusing on the breath.
So I use this book as my example because this is kind of what's driving my practice. My practice comes from as a youth and young adult, I used to journal a lot. And I found that journal was a good way for me to, kind of dive into self-discovery and, for self-reflection. It helped me process a lot of things that I didn't otherwise have a way to do. As a lot of these things are, it's Christian-based. As a UU, even though I grew up Catholic, as a UU, you don't get as much exposure to the Bible. So one of the things this challenges me to do is to sort of go back to the Bible and say, oh yeah, I remember that story and that one speaks to me. Or to just sit and think and be looking into it more deeply. This is a 5-year journey. It's the same 365 questions. So now I'm in year 2 of this book. And now the challenge is, okay, I answered that question one way last year. How am I answering it this year? And, is there growth in it?
Daryl and I do a spiritual practice that involves reciting and memorizing excerpts from all the great religions in the world, everything from Buddhist, Hindu, Orthodox Christian, Christian, Jewish, Native American, and we have a whole collection of these different scripts from different mystics, in which the overarching theme for all of them is not the rules of the religion, but when you cut away to the essence of the spiritual practice, the idea is we are all one.
This book that we use is called Passage Meditation, written by Eknath Easwaran, who is an Indian mystic, and this is his method of meditation, to memorize inspirational passages, and you gradually become those over time as you do the passage meditation. It brings me peace and centeredness and reduces the stress I feel, and that's a great reward in our stressful world.
And I do the practice because I want to feel good and comfortable in my own skin. And that's how I feel when I meditate. So that expression, you are a child of God, I really feel it. And I didn't before.
We have a common bond through meditation, which unites us even more than before we were meditating.
And lots of respect for each other.
So a little bit about my spiritual practice. They all sort of fall under the category of singing as spiritual practice. And one is what I'll briefly call medicine songs. And that has to do with taking a snippet of a song or a chant that I want to merge some of my inside experience with that song or that piece of a song. The second of three that I would talk about briefly is called embodied voice work, and it has to do with vocal improvisation. It has to do with typically wordless, but sometimes using words as well, going inside and bringing forth, sounding what I find is going on, and then following that sound, letting it unfold and letting it surprise me. So I'm not trying to create music, but I'm using voice and sound to come to realization and expression. And the third one is something I developed on my own when I started working in hospice. I'll call it lament singing, and it has to do with processing a loss. If I had a client who died, it was even a client who was leaving me. So I wanted to integrate what I had learned from them and let them go. And since I've worked in hospice for 12 years, it's typically about death loss for me. But also it can be other kinds of loss. So it brings me self, it brings me ground, it brings me joy. It moves emotion through that's stuck. I think that's part of what music does in the world. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
Dear one, do you ever have those moments where you experience something that is both so good and you want it to go on forever, and yet it is also tedious and you want it to be over as soon as possible? One of those moments for me was Wednesday mornings from 8 a.m. to 11:50, my third semester of seminary. The class was Spiritual Practices for Healing and Wholeness. I was required to take this class because I had been selected to be a spiritual formation group leader. In my seminary, spiritual formation groups were groups of first-year students who met once a month or so to discuss spiritual practices and go deep to create a community of practice and support. Our professors taught us that these groups would help us learn spiritual practices, which would form our ministry's bedrock and foundation. Spiritual Practices for Healing and Wholeness was a beautiful class because it was so hands-on. Seminary classes have a well-earned reputation for being dry, dusty, and heady, so this was a welcome change. We would get into the thick of it and learn about the practice or a spiritual practice for an entire class period. For me, my all-time favorite spiritual practice is group Lectio Divina, or sacred reading of a poetry in a group. It is a slow way of reading poetry, and it allows you to chew on the poem. We would also start the class with an hour of yoga, which was just wonderful. It was a really gentle form of yoga, but it was still great. Spiritual practices for healing and wholeness, here's the flip side, was also tedious and sometimes dreadful, because we were learning spiritual practices. And sometimes a spiritual practice just wouldn't fit, or it wouldn't speak to me or resonate with me. And then I'd have to slog through it and then listen to people talk passionately about how that practice spoke to them, how deeply it resonated. I remember feeling this way about practices around lament. At the time, I think I felt that lament was being angry at God and expressing grief and sorrow. And I didn't feel that way towards the divine. So I was stuck in that class with many classmates feeling deep despair or grief, and I wasn't joining them in that feeling. I was unable to be oriented in that way. I wanted it to be over as soon as possible. So you're probably wondering, what is a spiritual practice? I've just spent quite a bit of time talking about spiritual or contemplative practices, but I haven't really defined them. A spiritual practice is a practice or a ritual that brings wholeness to yourself or a community. It brings healing sometimes. It serves as something to center you sometimes. I call them contemplative practices because I realize that the word spiritual doesn't work for all people. However, contemplative is a slightly longer word than spiritual. So if I say spiritual and that word doesn't work for you, I encourage you to use your universal translators and to, in your mind, change spiritual to contemplative. Now, why is cultivating a spiritual practice critical? Because we need practices to create a sense of grounding. We need practices, too, that energize us. We need practices that encourage us to look at things from a different perspective. And in my mind, this is what spiritual practice does. And I've found that nearly all of these contemplative practices, at least the ones that I find meaningful, get me into this, I'm going to call it a state of flow. It's almost as if I'm rubbing a magnet on a metallic object in an attempt to magnetize it. By magnetizing it, it's been a long time since I've been in a science class, so I'm imagining like an animation from Sesame Street or Bill Nye the Science Guy here. I'm imagining that I'm aligning a bunch of little magnets inside that metallic object, which make it magnetic. Spiritual practices focus me, and while I am engaging in them, I am becoming aligned, and I feel charged up. Now, a central part of my theology is that I believe that there is a divine spark in us, maybe many sparks. And in this way, spiritual practices are like rubbing a spiritual magnet on me and getting all of those sparks into alignment. Another reason that spiritual practices are essential is that they provide a sense of grounding. They create someone who has slowed down. I don't know anyone who does spiritual practices quickly. Someone who is willing to stop and savor the world. Someone who is going to look at something from a different perspective. Friends, we often rush, thinking that we have to save the world, when really, and we should save the world, we should also savor it. Some spiritual practices call us to imagine the world as it ought to be. If we can reorient ourselves as individuals, we live reoriented lives. And when those lives interact with others, it changes the world. Now, when quarantine first started, or safer at home, or shelter in place, whatever name we were using to describe that, I felt unanchored. I'm sure a lot of you did as well. I developed or took part in a number of rituals throughout the early stages of quarantine because they provided structure to a life and a day that suddenly felt shapeless. These practices gave me hope because they forced me out of a worldview, or they also helped me see things differently. When my monkey mind started going everywhere, you know, that when your mind just jumps from thought to thought to thought. When my monkey mind started going everywhere, spiritual practices, they didn't exactly quiet the monkey mind down or the lizard brain down, but they certainly slowed it down. Even just developing a simple meditation habit or ritual can give shape and meaning to your life. And there are numerous potential health benefits as well. All of this reminds me of what Adrienne Marie Brown writes about in her book, Emergent Strategy. Specifically, this principle of emergent strategy. Small is good. Small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. This is illustrated by fractals. This concept is illustrated by fractals. You can probably find something fractal nearby, or can think of one without thinking too hard. Ferns or broccoli florets are all examples of something that is a fractal. Adrienne Marie Brown says this about the fractal. A fractal is an object or quantity that displays self-similarity, which means it looks roughly the same at any scale. Small-scale solutions impact the whole system. Use similar principles to build at all scales. Small is good. Small is all. How you behave, how you act, how you exist in the world changes the rest of the world. As we move outward, we see the impacts on the whole. Now, I am not saying everyone should develop the same spiritual practice. I am not saying that everyone needs to pray the Book of the Hours and that suddenly we would have world peace, or everyone needs to commit to yoga, 20 or 30 minutes of yoga a day, and that would solve all of our problems. I'm not saying any of that. But imagine how things could change if groups or pods of people could adopt spiritual practices, not the same one, but different ones, that they all committed to it. We'd be reminded that small is good, that the large is a reflection of the small, and that is powerful. Now, earlier in today's service, you heard from a few members of our congregation about their own spiritual practices. As you listened, and as we listen and listen together, keep in mind that each one of them has had their practice for several years. While I would hesitate to say that anyone is an expert in a spiritual practice, I think if someone does say they're an expert in spiritual practices, probably run from them. So I hesitate to say that anyone is an expert in spiritual practice. But I do want to acknowledge that with each one of them, when I was interviewing them, they described early on in their practice this feeling, this very human feeling of, am I doing this right? I have felt this way as well. In that class that I described earlier, I often felt as though I wasn't doing a spiritual practice right because it wasn't working, which is a really silly feeling to have. My professor, Brita Gill Austin, reminded me and the class that this is why they are called spiritual practices and not spiritual perfections. If you, dear one, try one of these practices and it doesn't work, I have 3 thoughts for you. First of all, there are many spiritual practices, and sometimes you need to try several before you find one that fits. I think I said that there were going to be 3. I'm not sure what the others were. Or maybe that was 3. Anyways, dear ones, wherever you are watching this, I think it would be powerful to have a community committed to individual ritual. Call it a spiritual practice or a contemplative practice or just going for a walk every day. They would all vary because we are each different people. And something, I think, would happen. Because I know that when one person needs to rest or recharge, the others continue to toil away. A community that is committed to ritual or spiritual practices would feel aligned, like those magnets. Now, as I said before, that community wouldn't necessarily be focused on the same goal, nor have the same worldview, but it would be focused. Dear one, there is work to do, and we need grounding, we need energy, we need the ability to look at things from many different perspectives. My challenge to you is in the next week, consider embarking on some spiritual practice. If you have the time, spend 10 minutes a day or 3 minutes a day engaging in one of these spiritual practices. You can also find so many websites that list and tell you how to do spiritual practices. Try committing to that spiritual practice for a week or 2. And if you don't have the time to spend 3 or 10 minutes on one of these practices, spend 20 minutes a day. Seriously, it'll do your body and mind and soul good. Don't try to get a practice right, because no one can really get these right. These practices are about building up muscle, about building up resilience, about filling up our love reserves. Because right now, the world needs more loving, caring, and centered people. May it be so. Our closing hymn this morning is at number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song, or also known as How Can I Keep From Singing? The words will appear on the screen. The words of our closing benediction are a traditional Celtic benediction. Deep peace of the running wave to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you, deep peace of the infinite peace to you. Go in peace, friends. I now invite you to extinguish the flames you have lit in your homes as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. As the flame goes out, let the smoke waft through the air for just a moment. And I invite you to type into the chat box, I carry the flame. Our closing hymn this morning is at number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song, or also known as How Can I Keep from Singing. The words will appear on the screen. Our closing hymn this morning is at number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song, or also known as How Can I Keep from Singing. The words will appear on the screen.